see the fire by the fireside,
fireside.
and the way the Asaase stories, it was beautiful. We got to know more about culture. We learned respect there. We learned values, and it changed a lot of children. But currently, things are different. So now let's talk more about folk tales. When we say folk tales, what are folk tales?
What are folk tales? Okay. Let me say hello to your viewers out there, and let's come back into the studio. Folk tales. The word folk would simply go to represent a group of people, a body of people, as can be recognized, whether they are an institution or defined by a geographical area. Let's talk about folk. So it's a group of people. So 3, 4, 5 young men, folk. People living in a fishing community, folk. Tales. These are stories affiliated to a particular group of people. So folk tales would then be these stories which are affiliated to a body collective, a body politic, let me call it that way. Do you get my point? For instance, let me broaden the conversation a bit.
Again.
So boys in school, we have stories from our dormitory. Some stories would go around in those circles. That's folk tales in those circles. Let's not go there. Let's come back into our traditional sense, where we know of our Asaase stories. Asaase stories would be among the Akans. People from northern Ghana also have their own versions of these folk tales. Now, how did these things come about, or why the need for folk tales? So stories were invented, or stories were created, stories were told to serve different purposes. You mentioned the element of education,
Right.
or folk tales being here to serve as virtue. We learn virtue from these things. We learn elements of respect. We learn things of communal living or communal labor. We learn the benefits of being honest. So in a way, it's there to serve as, what do you call it? A mode of instruction for us. Now, stories are born out of our regular everyday experiences. So most of these characters in these folktales are pseudo characters. We're talking about real life issues, yet we give them either animal characters. That makes it fables, or, So animal characters most of the time, or you might even have trees featuring in some of these stories. So we talk about a character like Kwekwanansi. Kwekwanansi is a larger than life character.
I think Kwekwanansi became the most popular amongst all the characters.
Do you know why Kwekwanansi is so popular?
Why?
Because you are Kwekwanansi. I am Kwekwanansi. Kwekwanansi is everybody. That is how we listen to Anansi stories and we do not get angry. We are able to take on the story because it's not us. Actually, Anansi is a big mirror. Folktales are a big mirror of what society is. You have a character like Adanko, the rabbit. Among the Akans, we call the rabbit or the hare Adanko. It's known to be fast. It's not known to be the most clever. You know the popular story of the race between the tortoise
and the rabbit.
And the hare. Where complacency becomes the attitude of the rabbit because it feels it just has speed. When the tortoise rather has patience and consistency, which eventually ends up earning him the position of the winner, where typically speed would have been an advantage. So these characters, you realize they reflect us or human traits in different ways. And so when we look at these stories as well, they are served to entertain us. So typically we have your by the fireside session, as you mentioned. So you have an older person and a younger person seated. The older person is the one telling the stories. When they are done, the younger people get a chance to ask these questions. Beyond the point of entertainment, do you realize the storytelling times are one of the few moments where children and elders are allowed to speak freely in a very traditional setting?
Right.
Because typically in conversational circles, children are not allowed to butt in when elders are having interactions.
So that's the time where, they're able to bond.
Thank you very much. A lot of barriers are broken. Gender barriers are broken. The age barrier is broken. Where you're from, where I'm from, all those things are really melted into one. At that point, it's just a storyteller.
How did it all
and
start? And, which particular tribe started this whole folk tale?
That is a broad question, a question that is probably older than me in this generation. In a different generation, I could probably give you an answer, but stories have been with us from way back. I think it forms the basis of almost every civilization. The need to communicate with each other, the need to interact, all work and no play. I would believe that is where these stories would come from. The need to also correct society's ills. That is where this need comes from. Among the Ewe, there's a culture called Halu. And so it's a music culture where they sing. For instance, we wake up in the morning and goats are missing from the community. And they all suspect, or from observation, they realize, it's this person who has been stealing the goats. And so all the women wake up and they sing and clap and pass behind his window. If you know you have been stealing goats, nobody is telling you to stop. One of these days, your soup will give you away. Have they mentioned anybody's name?
Nobody, but they've told you.
Among their accounts, we call it a kutia.
Yeah.
So a kutia is also a folkloric practice, for instance, which is meant to correct us. This can be traced into folklore, which is a bigger picture, but we're talking about folk tales in our stories. So you have Anansi being put to shame because, you know, he's conducted himself in a manner that was not proper. We have the story of Adanko who lost the race because he got complacent. In our present day and age, don't we see these things play out? In our political circles, religious circles, social circles, don't we see some of these stories play out?
Right.
Do we not see how Anansi came to earn ownership of all stories? He had to pass certain tests, which required him to be smart. Do we not talk about creative thinking now?
Right.
Do we not talk about creative problem solving now? Do we not say that we need what Intikuma had when his father Kweku Anansi was climbing the tallest tree to go hide his pot of wisdom? Anansi had the pot in front of him. Intikuma was like, Papa, if you brought the pot backward, you could climb, out of anger. So how well are parents open to receive instruction or inputs from children? Typically, a child is not allowed to tell the truth. I say we live in Africa where everybody knows the truth. A child is not allowed to tell it. And so a child to point out to his father, Papa, if you did this, it would be better. It was just a harmless suggestion, but the man was not in the position to take it. Isn't it reflective of our society?
Where it's only a few who
It's
have
just
the voice,
the old
and that voice is the
who are
only
wise.
ones that are heard.
Only our leaders who are wise. But they can't say, Nyansan timpen in dream. Wisdom does not live in the grey or the elders. Unfortunately, that is how mostly we want to see the picture as. It simply says that young people also have something to offer. And so in the realm of folk tales, we employ even proverbs, like
Yes, we do employ that.
So by the time you're done listening to folk tales, you'd have had a full circle social interaction. Because these stories border on different topics. From marriage to family life to honesty to, you know, how to be consistent in life. They are really embedded with a lot of morals.
But you know, some of the stories actually did put some sort of fear in the children.
Yes.
You know, I remember there was this particular story where they would say the child went out, it didn't come early, and those things, you know. Wasn't it a little bit too much for the children at
Well,
that
it
time?
might have been a lot of sensory overload, but it worked. It worked, didn't it? To get children to come home early when they've gone out to play. However, these things were born out of things pertaining at the time. Because in times earlier than now, certain things might have been real that today might not be so real. Where you have wild animals living close to our settlements. And so if you went out too late, you could get attacked. If you went out too late, a child could get abducted. If you went out too late, there's a chance the child will lose its way home.
Right.